What's up, everybody? This is Tom Lang with Warchant TV and Warchant.com. Today, we are recapping the beginning of spring practice. Who has stood out? Who is making early headlines? Our own managing editor, Ira Schoffel, talks to our own Jeff Cameron, host of The Jeff Cameron Show, about these very topics. Before we get going, make sure to hit the like button underneath this video. It helps us find more FSU fans who are looking for the great coverage we provide at Warchant TV. And help yourself out while you're at it. Hit the subscribe button and the bell right next to it. Every time Warchant TV brings you new content, you will be alerted. And also, when you open up your YouTube app or go to youtube.com, our videos will be right there waiting on you. We thank you so much for your support. So here it is, the conversation between Jeff Cameron, Ira Schoffel. We're talking about FSU spring football practice with a little bit of basketball sprinkled in towards the end, and a young quarterback is among the topics discussed. Let's get to the conversation.
You know, what I've said about this group, and for those that haven't read it yet, go read Ira's 321 on warchant.com. But I think there's better depth here, and I think there's overall more talent and guys that look the part, as I've said repeatedly, some more of them than we're used to seeing at spring, and that's enough to be very encouraged.
Yeah, man, and I like the fact that you used the Mark Krikorian soccer, the basketball team got a result this weekend.
Yeah, there you go, buddy. Oh, you know I know the lingo. We got a good result there.
Look, I think, again, we feel like we always have to preface this by saying, and I caught some of your guys' first hour, and I heard you guys doing it as well. We feel the need to always preface everything with, look, we're not getting ahead of ourselves. We're not saying this is a team that's going to compete for a championship, but the difference is noticeable. And I think it's noticeable to the players. I mean, it's got to be. There are guys on this team that have started either last season or the season before who now look at that depth chart and look at the guys they're lined up out of practice and think, okay, man, I got to bring it at a high level to have a chance to be on the field. And if they don't realize that, then they're going to get left behind, because there are a few positions on this team right now where there's no competition. Almost every position, there's real competition, and that's got to make them a lot better.
I agree, and I think you started with the thing that really wowed me more than anything else. I know it is absolutely normal for all of us to have our eyes gravitate towards skill positions. The sexy positions are receivers and running backs and quarterbacks and defensive backs, but you got to start with that offensive line to see the numbers, to see the ability to perhaps rotate, move guys to different spots and have depth behind it. That's not anything that Norvell or Coach Atkins has had the luxury of in his time so far at Florida State. And I think they'll have that as long as, knock on wood, everybody stays healthy. They've got real competition there on the offensive line.
Yeah, not only have they not had it, but Florida State hasn't had it in a long time. That towards the end of Rick Trickett and Jimbo Fisher's time, they did have one big class where they tried to fill some holes on the offensive line. They signed a bunch of offensive linemen, and really almost none of them panned out. It was the class with Juwan Williams and those guys, and that class didn't pan out. And then you had some coaching changes, and they have not been able to get back on solid footing since. Last year, bringing in Dylan Gibbons and bringing in Devontae Love Taylor the year before kind of, gave them it was kind of like, Band-Aids and baling wire. I mean, they were just trying to make do. But this is starting to look like an offensive line, again, where you have depth, you have competition, and you have a front line that, assuming guys, if guys can stay healthy, you have a front line that will give you an honest chance in most every game that you play this coming season. Now, again, they still have to stay healthy because you don't have a too deep of guys that can play at that level. But the fact that you have some depth gives you a better chance to keep guys healthy. I mean, a lot of guys the last couple of years that have gotten injured, a lot of those guys have gotten injured in practice. I think if you go back, I think Maurice Smith got injured in practice. I think Dylan Gibbons might have gotten injured in practice. There's several guys because they've had to play so many reps and they're out there so much because sometimes they didn't have 10 offensive linemen. They barely could fill a 2 deep. You might have had guys playing on both lines. Well, now you've got a 3 deep on the offensive line, and there's three of the 4 freshmen that haven't enrolled yet are offensive linemen. So they're going to have even more guys going into next fall. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, and he talked, on Friday, Coach Norvell talked about that improved depth and talked about the ability to move guys around possibly. He kind of tipped his hand a little bit, talking how critical it was for certain guys to have good springs and to be part of that. And that led you to, during the 3-2-1, talk about, where will Darius Washington line up this season? And I would have never thought going into the camp that we would have those kinds of conversations about moving guys around and trying to plug other guys in and having competition at certain places where a year ago it was unthinkable.
Yeah, and I think he's really, he gives them a great luxury. I mean, I really think that they feel like he's a guy that could play any of the 5 positions. Alex Atkins said that when we spoke to him on Friday. And last year he worked at some guard. He was the emergency center. There were a lot of times where they were close to moving him to center. There are some people around the program that feel like center is where he might end up being best in his position, kind of like Cameron Irving came in and made that move at some point. And so I think that's a possibility, but I don't think it's a possibility this year because you have Caden Lyle. So now it becomes, are you better off with him at guard and one of these other guys like Lloyd Willis or Bless Harris or somebody at tackle? Or are you better off with him at tackle and one of these other guys at guard? Or are you better off with Darius kind of, being a guy that floats? I don't think that's going to be the case. My guess is he'll end up in the starting lineup, but it could be at a number of different positions, and it's not a lock. I mean, there's a chance they could say, you know what, we like these other 5 guys that work best together, and Darius is going to be first off the bench really at any position.
Were you surprised that Coach Norvell specifically mentioned redshirt sophomore Lloyd Willis?
I'm not, because we've just been hearing for the last 2 years. The kid's been on campus now for a good 3 years, and, from going back 2 years ago, I remember hearing people say that guy looks like, people inside the program say, that guy, of everybody we have on the offensive line, he's the one that you could say, okay, that guy could be an NFL offensive lineman. Not because he could play that way, but just he has the physical tools. So then the question was, because he was so raw, he grew up as a basketball player, could they develop him? Could they get him to that point? And I think over these last 2 years with Alex Atkins have been great for him. And I was real interested to see if he made another jump coming into the season. And the fact that Mike Norvell singled him out, I think is a great sign. And I think there's an opportunity for him. I mean, he's been here 3 years now. He's certainly got all the physical tools. If he can put it together, that gives you not just a guy who could play offensive line, but maybe a guy who could look like an NFL player on the offensive line, which is something they haven't had in a long time.
I asked Tom this, and I've kind of posited this myself. Curious for you, who's the one guy, or maybe of the newcomers, who's a guy that stood out to you right off the bat that you thought, oh, okay, well, that might be different? Anybody that we saw that came, whether it's a transfer portal guy or true freshman, whomever, that you thought, okay, I'm excited to see what he becomes?
Now I'm going to go with AJ Duffy. And there are a few other guys that I could name, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. But I don't know if we've seen a better passer of the football on that practice field since Seamus left. I mean, it's just, and again, it's one day. We'll see how it goes over time, but it is one day on top of what he did at the Elite 11. Not at the Elite 11, he did okay, but then at the Under Armour, the All-America game, he was probably the lowest rated quarterback there, according to the recruiting services, went in and by everybody's account was the best quarterback there. And then we had been hearing good things about his first couple months on campus, and then to see the way he threw the football and the variety of throws he can make and his release and his mechanics, and he's a coach's son. I just think all those things, man, make you excited because, again, Jordan's I don't have any question Jordan's the best option at quarterback for Florida State in 2022, but I don't recall a better throwing quarterback on those practice fields in the last 7 or 8 years.
He did look good. He did. And it's funny, in some ways, you can't be afraid to say it. It's like, the second you say it, people are going to roll their eyes because he's probably not going to, you don't want him to have to start this year. You got problems if he does, but you still can't look the other way and pretend that you're not excited by what you saw, even in 7-on-7s, just to say, man, confident, assertive, threw a pretty football, comes off his hand really easy, threw in rhythm, recognized what he was supposed to recognize in a timely fashion. All those things are reasons to believe that the future is very bright. And I would dare say this, and I mean, I'm trying to be careful, but there have been guys come through here at quarterback that didn't look that good in year 2 of just throwing the ball around. Let's just put it that way.
And the other thing I'd say is, and again, putting all the clues together, they have kind of tacitly put their chips in with AJ Duffy a few times now. If you remember when Nico Marchio had committed to Florida State first, he was not excited that they were going to recruit AJ Duffy, but they were like, sorry, Nico, we're recruiting AJ Duffy. And then when AJ Duffy committed, Nico bounced. Then going into coming into right before signing day when they had a chance to get involved with some high-profile transfers, some 4- and 5-star guys that were on the transfer market out there nationally. Florida State did not dabble in any of that. They wanted to stick with A.J. Duffy, made that commitment to him, and I really think you're seeing why they were so committed to A.J. Duffy. Now, that's not to say that they think he's going to be a 3- or 4-year starter, or that Chris Parson, who's in the next class, won't have a fair shot, or that A.J. Duffy's going to be what they hope. But you could tell how excited they were about the possibility of him. And this was, seeing him in person was, the first time I think for any of us to realize, okay, now I see what they like. There's a bunch of variables that go into a guy becoming a starting quarterback at a school like Florida State. We all know, we've seen all the pitfalls through the years, but if he can avoid those, it certainly looks like the talent is there.
4th consecutive year that Florida State has a winner on the hardwood of the 6th Man of the Year award. It's Matthew Cleveland. Do you want to add your thoughts to how Florida State concluded the year? Frankly, I think it's impressive to finish 10-10, given what they were and what we were talking about with them a month ago. Not a great season. A lot of reasons for that. Many of them centered around injury, obviously. But to win 3 straight, to finish 17-13, 10-10 in conference, again, a long way off from where they had hoped to be and where they have been in recent years. But I thought they showed some fight where I was worried at one point they weren't going to give us that.
Yeah, and the NC State game was more of a formality because of those last 3 games, that was the game that they should have won. They had every business winning. The other 2, maybe not so much. Winning at Virginia, certainly in the style they did.
Beating Notre Dame
at home.
Yep.
Those were 2 impressive. But they had to finish the deal, to finish with a 3-game winning streak. And yeah, man, again, I just think I had them circling the drain after that Boston College game. They had played so bad at North Carolina, showed a little bit of life for a half against Duke, played so bad against Boston College. I thought they're going to finish below 500. The NIT is a pipe dream at that point. And then all of a sudden, they kind of turned it around. They found themselves one of these last 3 games and, give them a chance. I think they beat Syracuse in the first round. I think Duke is probably going to drop a hammer second round game. But, man, again, it's just if they could end this season and the ACC tournament winning 4 of their last 5 games with what I think they're going to do with this roster going forward, I think it gives you a better feeling, certainly, than what you had 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Did you derive as much joy as I did watching 94-81 in Cameron Indoor?
The thing is, man, I had a hard time. I felt a little bit bad for some of the players because you could just tell it was in their throat. And I'm not saying I feel bad for Duke basketball players.
I was about to say, Ira, be careful.
On a human level, that's a tough situation. But seeing these kids crying, it's just like, man, if you want a definition of entitlement,
woo.
This is the end of your world because they lost a basketball game and you're, the king, the emperor didn't get to go out with a win. But, I also would have liked to have seen 16 hours of coverage of Bobby Bowden's final game. But, hey, we'll let bygones be bygones.
Be well, sir. Talk to you later.
See you, man.
Ira Schoffel, Warchant.com. Yeah, that was good.
It's like the day that they dreamed of with the ACC network. And we'll see what the ratings were and if we get any extra receipts for that particular basketball game.
Man, this is where I was laughing because not only was I enjoying that play out the way that it did, the fact that my wife was laughing at Duke, she's so indifferent. She was like, look at these losers. I was like,
oh, well.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, she's talking about the students. She wasn't talking about the players.
Oh, it's a good team.
She was talking about the students weeping with 3 minutes to play. Like that. They kept showing that one little group of like 5, that pod of 5, just like, oh, what is happening?
They failed me. Shut up. You pipe down. Be quiet. I'm talking. They failed me.
It's the Jeff Cameron Show, 93.3 Real Talk Radio and Warchant TV.